This episode of Skirmish Supremacy is brought to you by Reformation Brewery, the official beer of your game night. Punch my papers together like I'm a news anchor. And apparently we are now broadcasting. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of Skirmish Supremacy. This is episode 114. Nick is not with us tonight, but I am your host, Tim Korkleski, and tonight we are joined by Simon Berman of WYSIWYGames, and we are to talk about Z First Impact, a Kickstarter that's out right now and will be out for another 31 days. Simon, how you doing?
I'm good,
man.
It's Kickstarter launch day, which is always a bit of an adrenaline rush, but I'm good.
Awesome. So, how long have you been with WYSIWYGames? I actually ran into you a little bit at Adepticon, and you were pushing off. Well, I'm not going to say pushing off. You were showing off Planet of the Apes, which is a game that's coming up from WYSIWYG, but that's not what they're focusing on now. Right now,
Correct.
It's Z First Impact, or ZFI for a lot of people that have been around board games for a while.
Yeah, so I've been with WYSIWYG about a year now. I'm a games marketing consultant. I used to work at Privateer Press as a social marketing manager. Worked on a whole bunch of miniatures games, RPGs and stuff. And WYSIWYG is one of the companies I work very closely with, and I've been helping them do their marketing and get their ducks in a row for about a year now on a couple of different games. And this is the first one we're launching on Kickstarter.
Fantastic. So I guess let's talk a little bit about the history of ZFI. This is not the first time that it's been on Kickstarter.
It is the first time it's been on Kickstarter.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's not the first time it's out, which is slightly weird. But the interesting thing about this project is Z First Impact was published traditionally in France about 5 years ago. It was sort of not quite self-published. The guys who made the game built a company around it called Zero Live, and they put the game out. They raised money in the traditional manner and produced the game in France. And they put out a second big box expansion for it. So, they've got kind of a proven track record with that. It's full of miniatures and tiles. It's a co-op 1 to 4 player zombie, mutants, aliens, kind of dungeon crawler style game. It's pretty brutal. But the Kickstarter we're doing now is to do an English language edition. So we are one of the cool things about this is that we have some product. So we're going to take that and we are repackaging it with new English language rules. We're taking the opportunity to update the errata that was gathered from the French edition. It means that we can ship the core game and the first expansion in just a couple months after the Kickstarter ends.
Awesome. So this is very much meant to be a fast turnaround to say, look, this game's out. It's tried. It's true. Now enjoy it the rest of the world outside of France. Yeah,
exactly. So it's cool. And of course, as we unlock stretch goals, those are going to come out later. So we're going to do two waves of shipping. Your any stretch goal stuff that you get will be shipped in September of 2019. So about a year after the core game, but you're going to be able to play the base game and the first expansion almost right away, just a matter of months after the Kickstarter.
Awesome. So this is something that's been in the planning for a while now in order to make sure that this all falls in line the way you want it.
Exactly.
Great. So let's talk a little bit about ZFI, like the world itself. What can you tell us about the game?
So the game is sort of it's kind of inspired by that like late 90s, early 2000s like era of like kind of PlayStation survival horror games like Resident Evil, or my personal favorite. My touchstone's always been Parasite Eve. I don't know if you remember that game. It was kind of game. I love that game too. I think that might have been the first like RPG I really played all the way through. But so it's kind of got that like slightly goofy, very over the top 90s, extreme feel to it. Where your heroes are, they're almost superheroes. You're not playing any like, Joe Schmo with a shotgun. Like, these are all super soldiers and spies and assassins, and they're all in the employ of a mysterious agency or a mysterious corporation, just like any good 90s survival horror game. So the world, the idea is that it's 1998, and a meteor hits the planet and causes this. It spreads this horrible virus that turns some people into zombies and mutants. Nobody knows what's going on, and the world basically ends. Your survivors are elite operatives for the Arcos Corporation who are trying to, well, what Arcos is up to is kind of a mystery, and you're not going to find that out right away. But they're involved somehow or other, or at least they're certainly trying to profit off of the situation. So your team of survivors goes into New York City to establish a base of operations to gather samples, and they do this in the midst of all of these awful mutants and zombies that are running around. And then later on, you discover that there may even be some aliens running around, and so, you know, maybe there's more to that meteor than meets the eye.
Right. So what you're saying, because I'm sure that a lot of listeners are going to think this is not a Zombicide clone.
No, definitely not.
Okay, cool. Now that we've established that, let's talk a little bit more about the game itself. So you said that these heroes are not your typical like everyday Joe Schmoes that were kind of wrapped up in this. These are like badass contract killers and things like that that are actually there too. Okay.
Some of them are like ex-convicts who've, you know, been let out to work for Arcos, and, you know, they're not necessarily the best people in the world to hang out with, but they certainly are going to get the job done.
Okay, cool. So from what I was seeing on the Kickstarter, there are actually 2 chapters of this. So chapter 1 is kind of like the quote unquote base game. What survivors come in that first box?
So, let me pull up the, you can edit this, right?
Oh no, this is all staying on there live. It's okay.
One moment while I pull out the list. Sorry, it's been a long day here, and my brain is not fully working.
Folks, this is the value of the conversation.
Yeah. Right. So the first 4 survivors you have are Arthur, who is kind of your hacker tech specialist. He has some interesting special abilities that let him utilize equipment in different ways. He's very agile. You've got Yuri, who's my favorite. He's from Russia, and he is Yuri had a bad day at some point in the past. He's horribly scarred, and now he's kind of wrapped up in this hazmat suit permanently, which actually makes him resilient towards the effects of some gas effects and things that happen in the game. And he's also got a flamethrower, which is hard to argue with, although it does tend to burn through ammo pretty fast. And ammo is a really big part of this game. You know, you're really going to be scrounging and looking for every bullet or canister of gas or whatever you can to stay alive. But Yuri can clear a room pretty good. He's also got a katana, which, you know, that kind of goes back to like the really crazy like 90s feel of it, right? Like, dude's got a flamethrower and a katana. Like there's no like, you know, nods to realism. Like, you know, the only thing he's missing is a trench coat to be a total 90s cliche. But, you know, it's that stuff's a cliche for a reason, right? Because it was cool.
Right, exactly. I'm expecting like the Rob Liefeld like pouches and he can't draw feet, and everybody is like, you know, just tight tank tops.
Right. So, you know, those are, like I said, Yuri's my favorite because, you know, I'm a sucker for heroes in gas masks. I always thought that was just cool. You've got Chaos, who is a convict biker. He's got a shotgun and a telescoping scythe. So it's kind of, imagine a scythe that's also a big nunchuck.
Okay.
Right. So, you know, sometimes you need to, like, you know, cut down a zombie next to you. Sometimes you need to cut down a zombie, you know, 2 squares away. Things like that. And then we've got Sun, who is an assassin. She's got throwing knives and these 2 gas-powered whirring chain blades that, again, are real good for cutting off zombie heads. So those are the 4 heroes to start with. They all have secondary abilities, like Sun is a medic. She's also got the acrobat ability. So, you know, she can grapple onto rooftops and things like that. Chaos is particularly good at driving vehicles, so he gets bonuses when he's driving the vehicle from the first box set, stuff like that. So they all have a lot of features and unique equipment that they can use until inevitably some of their stuff breaks and they've got to scrounge and find a new gun.
Okay. So there is no like level up mechanic in this game like Zombicide. Obviously, I'm, you know, not making the comparisons between the 2 games, but there's no level up mechanic. These characters are what they are, and then you just have to make sure that for each mission that you play that you stay alive to the best of your ability.
More or less. You know, we have some alternate play modes. You know, we've got PvP modes. We've got, you know, some persistent stuff where, you know, you start the game, you start the next scenario with the equipment you ended the last one with, if you want to have that more kind of immersive narrative campaign feel. But the stories, these 8 scenarios in the core game tell a story in and of themselves.
Cool. All right. So I know that you mentioned certain skills. So one of the things that you said that I noticed is that Sun, you said she has acrobatics, so she can get to rooftops. So are buildings scalable in this game?
Yeah. So, when you look at the map, you'll see all the various buildings. And when you start the game, you'll put tiles on them. Until a player moves into the building, you can get onto the roof. And in some cases, there may be objectives up there. You may want to get up there to get away from the zombies. Although some zombies are able to climb up there, like the Ravagers, who are they're all construction workers who have been infected with the Z virus. The vertical movement is part of the game to a certain degree, while you're on top of a building, you can't explore within it. So that's also a tactical choice you'll have to make at some points in the game.
Okay, cool. So again, kind of going back to that whole idea that you're not just common survivors. Like, you could determine how you're going to approach a building. It's just not just kick in the door and see what's on the inside.
Right. Yeah. Okay. In some cases, you may want to get on top of the building for a tactical advantage. In fact, one of the tiles has a sniper gun on a bipod that's sort of like hardwired onto the top of the building. So while you're up there, that survivor can make attacks at great distance, and in some cases get some pretty good stuff going on with that. Okay,
cool. So we talked a little about the heroes, at least in the first box. Now, there's a second box that goes with this that is being called Chapter 2.
Correct.
So that also introduces other scenarios, but at the same time, this is an expansion, but it's its own standalone box, right?
Yes.
Okay.
You do need effectively. So there's 4 new heroes. It's all completely compatible with the original one. You've got João, who is from Brazil. He's got a metal baseball bat and kind of a minigun. You've got Flo, who is she's a sniper, so she's got a long-range weapon and a pistol. You've got Sven, who is a giant berserker with an axe and a maul. And then you've got I screwed up. Joe has a grenade launcher. Kennep is the one with the minigun and a laser-sighted pistol. So you have a pretty good range of heavy damage dealers in the second box.
Okay, cool. So the first box is going to be a little bit more. Well, you said a vehicle in the first box. The second box, I'm assuming there's no vehicle.
There is no vehicle, but in keeping with the heavy hitters, it does come with the Titan, which is the biggest alien boss we've had to date. He's enormous. He's like 2.5 times the size of the other of the heroes. He's carrying a traffic light as a weapon, and he's kind of the end boss of the second set of missions in Chapter 2.
Wow. Okay, so everything scales in this game. So like Chapter 1 is kind of the start of establishing your base of operations in New York. Chapter 2 is like all hell's breaking loose. Now it's time to actually start kicking in more skull compared to the first box.
Yeah, exactly. The stakes are definitely raised.
Okay, cool. So I guess let's talk about that a little bit. Like, obviously, both boxes are kind of meant to be played Chapter 1, then Chapter 2, but you can the scenarios seem to progress as you go. So it's not just like, oh, well, they all stay the same challenge rating throughout the game. It's like, no, the first one kind of teaches the game and then it ramps up from there. But there's a continuous story. It's not just like, we're going to play this scenario tonight.
Right. I mean, and you certainly could do that if you just want to, if you play through the campaign or you read through the book and you're like, this one looks cool, let's do this one. You're not going to miss anything by doing that, but you'll get a fuller experience if you play through them as a story.
Cool. All right. So I guess let's talk about some of the monsters that are in the game, because you mentioned zombies, you mentioned mutants, you mentioned aliens.
Yep. So, we've got our base zombie in the game, because, it's a zombie game. So you got to have your just, Walking Dead dude. We got the carcass. And they're like any zombie game, your basic zombie is not particularly dangerous in and of itself. But you start getting hordes together, and we have a mechanic called the horde mechanic, where groups of zombies that see each other start moving as hordes, and start moving together, and they can become quite fearsome in that case. One of the other big things about the game is noise, and that's every time you fire a gun or do some other things that happen, it generates noise, and zombies are drawn towards noise. So by doing things in the game, you're going to draw the attention of zombies. So in some cases, you may be engaging in tactics like having one player do something that generates a lot of noise to draw the zombies towards them, while your other players try to accomplish their objective elsewhere on the map. So the carcass, which is our basic zombie, that he's kind of the heart of the game, right? Like he's one-on-one, he's no big deal, but you get six or 10 of them in one place, and you're going to have a bad time.
Right.
And just by fighting them, you may be drawing attention to yourselves. So they're kind of dangerous on any level. After that, we've got the Toxico, and Toxicos are they're former Arcos Corporation scientists who have been infected, and they're carrying dangerous biological samples. They're wearing hazmat suits. They look pretty mean, and they can do things like throw these samples at you. They're a little smarter. They move a little more agilely than other zombies. They're kind of the next step up. And then we have a couple of other zombies. We've got the Ravager. They're infected mutant construction workers, so they can get onto the top of the buildings, which other zombies normally can't, or mutants normally can't.
Okay.
They're a little faster. And then the last zombie we have is the Howler, and they are infected police officers. And they're not individually much more dangerous than a carcass, but they scream when they're attacked, and they make a great deal of noise, and so the zombie hordes will be drawn towards them much more readily. So if you see them on the board, you kind of want to get them out of the way before they start making noise and drawing large amounts of zombies to your presence.
Right, so definitely kill them first if you can.
Yeah, so those are... Oh, I'm sorry, one more zombie. I forgot about my other favorite, the Blobber. They are sewer workers who have been infected, and they've gotten all massively bloated with, some combination of, the gas from a rotting body plus whatever's going on from the impact, the chemicals on the meteor that impacted the Earth, and they can spew clouds of gas at survivors from quite a range away. They're very, very dangerous, and just being in the same zone as them can do damage to you. So they're a real problem. So those are the 5 kinds of zombies you get, and then we have in the core box we have one real mutant, the Lick, and those are humans who have been mutated, and they now live in the sewers like any good 80s horror movie. And they will jump out and grab you from the sewers. So when you're moving around the board, you kind of got to keep an eye on the sewers if you're playing a scenario with licks in them, because they can be a real threat to you. And they're called licks because they've got giant tongues they reach out and will attack you with from a space or two away. So
much like that Resident Evil liquor.
Exactly. And then we have the Sentinel, which is the other mutant in the game. Sentinels are big mutated humans. They're real brawlers. There's only a couple of them in the box because they're real threats. And they'll just smash the hell out of you and really, really mess you up. So there's something you kind of need to deal with tactically, because if you just wade into it with them, they're gonna give you a real hard time.
Gotcha. So it's akin to like dealing with any like mini boss in a game where it's like, okay, I can't just walk up to this thing and bitch slap it with my basic weapon. I have to really think about how I'm going to approach this.
Yeah, and of course, in the first scenarios, he's almost always going to be supported by a number of other zombies. So
right,
he's tough.
Right, so kind of going back to like you were saying, where this game's a little bit more gritty in that aspect. Like you said, Chaos, he's got this expendable like nunchuck scythe thing that can reach out and hit zombies. It's not like Chaos can be like, "Don't worry, guys, I can solo this guy," and just walk up to this Colossus and be like, "Yeah, whatever."
Well, the Sentinels we're talking about right now, the Colossus are in the other book, but yeah, Chaos is a good chance of maybe dealing with a Sentinel one-on-one, but it's not in his best interests. He's going to want to have somebody else putting some damage on it first, and certainly if there's a bunch of other zombies around, that could go wrong for him real quick.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
And then the final big miniature in the first.
Talk a bit about that. Oh yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, it was the Rhino. Which is the armored APC we have with big guns on it. Some scenarios will let you have it, and you can drive it around the board. You can mow zombies down with both the guns. Survivors can get on board and man the weapons, or just get transported around in it. You can run zombies over. It's real tough. It'll give you a turn or two of real good power on the game, but you got to keep it fueled up because, like I said, scarcity is one of the big aspects of the game. So if you run out of gas, it just grinds to a halt.
Right. So let's talk about that a little bit, because this is one thing that you mentioned to me before that is definitely something that sets this apart. Is again, being a French game and very Euro based, it has some Euro mechanics to it. And a lot of it is the resource management behind it. Yeah,
a little bit of that. So, whenever you make an attack with a weapon, you're going to spend ammunition, and each of your characters has a management board to go along with it. And you'll have trackers that let you track how much ammunition you have, how much health you have, all of that stuff. So, when you run out of ammo, you're out of ammo until you find some more. And you can find more by searching buildings. There are dumpster tokens that you can look through and maybe find loot, although in some cases one of the dumpsters is booby trapped, and when you use the dumpster token, you pull it over, and if there's a certain icon under the bottom of it, it generates noise, and the zombies will start moving towards you. So there's always an element of risk to it. And of course, survivors can trade their ammunition and weaponry back and forth as well. But yeah, I mean, there's that going on, and there's also a diminishing health tracker. So as your survivors take damage, they start taking penalties to the dice they roll on what they can do. So the more hurt you are, the worse shape you are. So you're going to be looking for things to heal yourself. There may be, in some scenarios, there may be airdrop supply crates that will be able to help you out with things. But yeah, that managing your resources on the individual level is real important. You may have to decide, like, well, do I want to hang on to this gun I have for now, for when my gun breaks later, or do I want to make sure it gets to somebody whose weapon is broken now? And is it worth going to the other side of the board to do it? Is that going to compromise our achieving our mission, right? So yeah, there's quite a bit of that to it.
All right, cool. So you mentioned something a moment ago where people can swap weapons. So using Yuri as the example, where he's got the flamethrower to start, he could swap that flamethrower with somebody else in the party if he feels that they're better able to use it at this time.
Circumstantially, yeah. They always start, you always start with the same weapons you have, although if you're playing in the persistent mode, to start with the weapons you had at the beginning of the last game. But yeah, there may be situations where you can do that, but they'll always start with those, and they're usually pretty good with them, so you may not want to swap them out initially, but situational, you could do that, yeah.
Right, so, in the example, like, I was kind of flipping through the book a little bit, I know, like, Chaos, using him as the example, he's got the weird nunchuck scythe thing, typical 90s Image Comics
right.
Weapon and a shotgun. So, like, for example, if he's driving the vehicle, it might be better for him to give his shotgun to somebody else so they have a backup weapon so he could drive the vehicle around the board and take care of things that way.
Possibly, yeah.
Okay. Cool. All right. So scenario-wise, how varied is this game? Like, obviously, it's not just we do this, kick in doors, search room, spawn zombie.
Right. No, it's all very scenario driven. Like, a lot of it has you trying to find specific rooms. Like, that's the base of the game. Is, you're looking for the headquarters room in the first scenario, right, where you're going to set up your base. And once you've done that and you cleared a certain amount of zombies, that scenario ends. Other scenarios may be things like, you have to what is a good example? You may be doing things like picking up an item and taking it to a certain place while accomplishing secondary goals as well, right? Like, you may need to kill a certain amount of a specific kind of zombie, or keep zombies from entering a certain area of the board, or in some cases just survive a certain number of turns against a large zombie horde. So there's quite a bit of variety. And once you add the chapter 2 stuff, there's quite a bit of stuff that can happen there.
Right. So speaking of chapter 2, the one thing that I do have to say after looking at that thing is that the Titan miniature is absolutely freaking terrifying.
It's huge, isn't it?
Yeah. So, folks, to give you an idea, is that your miniatures for the survivors are your typical 28 millimeter miniatures. The Titan is I'm not going to say the size of like your typical He-Man style action figure, but it's close.
He's not far off. Yeah, I'd say he's about 4 inches tall. I think maybe 4.5. It's enormous. He's using a traffic light as a bludgeon. That's his weapon. He's just ripped that off of a traffic light, and he's gonna mess you up with it.
And has ripped somebody's head off too. He's actually got in his lower right hand. So this thing's also got 4 arms. So, yeah. So that's the boss alien. He's rough. Yeah. So the one thing that we kind of talked about a little bit throughout this whole thing is the fact that it's very much how can I put it? It's a spiritual representation of Parasite Eve and Resident Evil and things like that. So, like, even as you're mentioning, like, ammo is scarce. You can't just go out there guns akimbo hoping for the best. You really have to be cognizant of everything that you're doing to make sure that you're not just, blowing ammo, because it's your characters might be these over the top badasses in their own way, but you run out of ammo and that's not going to be too good for you. So, what are some other elements in the game that really kind of steps up the that nail biting horror feel?
I think it's the way the weapons break. that's kind of an interesting mechanic. So when you make an attack in this game, you are comparing your survivor stats against the zombie or mutant stats, and each zombie or mutant has its own card on which you can track its health and its other statistics. And you need to roll a certain amount. And if you roll a certain amount, you'll do a point of damage to it. If you roll high enough, you'll kill the creature. But if it also has a minimum number, and if you don't reach that minimum number in your roll, your weapon breaks.
Oof.
So every time you make an attack, there's a chance that your weapon is going to get broken. And after a few rounds of the game, it's almost inevitable that your weapon's going to malfunction. So I think that's the biggest source of tension for me, is that anytime you make that attack, you may need to be thinking, you always need to be thinking about where you're going to get your next weapon, because inevitably you're going to have to. And I think that's kind of a really interesting, cool piece of mechanics.
And is there a way to repair a weapon if push comes to shove?
In some situations, yeah, I believe in box 2 there's some ways to do that, but typically you're just going to have to replace it.
Oof, that's rough. So if you've got the starting characters like Yuri with a flamethrower, if his flamethrower breaks, it's like, well, that was just the one thing he was really super awesome at. So,
right.
Oof, that's rough. That is rough.
Again, it kind of gives them an advantage going into the scenario, but the game is also designed with the expectation that nobody's going to really be ending the scenario with the same weapons they started it with. So losing your signature weapon early in the game is not necessarily the end of the world.
Okay, cool. So it's not like, oh, I've already started the downward spiral, I might as well just
not at
do
all.
my best to not die as fast.
Generally, what those signature weapons are is you kind of want to save them for a specific situation that it's going to be particularly good at. So you might want to hang on to using your flamethrower until you find a room full of zombies you need to clear, and rely on your secondary weapon until that time.
Okay.
But generally, the game isn't going to punish you for having had one round of bad rolls or whatever.
Okay.
3 rounds of bad rolls, yeah, you're probably in trouble. But losing that signature weapon early in the game is generally not going to be the end of things for you.
Awesome. So, I mean, definitely there's a lot of elements to the game as far as the tactical advantages of being able to scale buildings, enter through the roof, a lot of different stuff that we haven't quite seen in the typical, I guess if you want to call it dungeon crawl survival horror game.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the other things you kind of mentioned on the Kickstarter page as well was the augmented reality. How does that work in the game?
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So it's purely cosmetic, but it kind of adds a level of immersion to it. And it's live in France. I think it's going to be live in the US any day now. And what it is it's a free app you can get, and you can, while you're playing your game, you can hover your camera on your phone over it, and through the app, it'll sort of animate certain portions of the battlefield and give you kind of a fun, cartoony feel of what's actually happening in the game.
Okay, cool. So what are some of the effects that we could expect to see coming from the augmented reality side of it?
Oh, you can see there's explosions. You'll see some of the zombies kind of move around and wave their arms, and some gory animations, things like that.
Okay. Any background music or anything like that to kind of help put the mood of the game into it?
I don't think there's music, but I think there are some sound effects.
Okay, cool. So there's definitely something there to where it's quirky, but it's not required.
No, not at all. It's purely for fun. But I guess they had a friend who was making apps, and they kind of just did it as a freebie thing to kind of just enhance the gameplay. But again, it's totally for fun. It's not mandatory. You're not going to miss any gameplay if you don't use it.
Awesome. Okay. So in the campaign, it shows that there's quite a bit of digital downloads for, I'm guessing, new scenarios, new campaign features, things of that nature. But there's also quite a few things that look like they're going to be stretch goals that are unlocked later. Are you able to talk about some of those right now and what their potentials are for the game?
Yeah, for sure. We're kind of doing it every other stretch goal, starting with the first, is going to be a digital mission. Okay. And we have 8 of those planned, and the idea is that if we unlock all 8 of those, we're going to publish or actually if we unlock 6 of those, the next stretch goal will be a printed copy of a new 8-mission scenario book.
Okay.
So that'll add a whole third series before we even get to our next major expansion. And those are going to be free to all backers. Even if you're just backing at the $50 level, everybody's going to get access to those digital missions. And that's going to tell a new story that, that's going to use components from both the first and the second chapter boxes. So you're going to get you're going to use all of your stuff all at once. So you'd be able to use the Rhino and the Titan and all of that stuff together. After that, the first expansion, which is the one I'm going to really talk about right now, because we kind of want to save some reveals here.
Sure.
It's called Rescued. And that is a sort of medium-sized box expansion that is going to add a new vehicle. It's a helicopter called the Vampire. So that's going to add a whole new element to the game that'll come with a console, just like the command console for the Rhino vehicle. It's going to come with a bunch of refugee figures that you have to try and rescue in some of the scenarios, and new building tiles, new tokens, all that good stuff, a bunch of new cards, and I think some new zombies and mutants and stuff. We're actually going to be showing that off in the next day or two in an image on the Kickstarter, just to get people hyped up for it.
Nice. Okay.
So that's the first box expansion, and then we have 6 more actually sort of announced. And if we blow through everything, we've got a couple more to show off after that, but we're going to hold those in secret. But I think
don't spoil the surprise. Yeah. It's just.
But we're going to show off Rescued real soon, and I think you can probably get an idea of what you might find in boxes called Blackout and Inferno and Nuclear as we go along. So
I'm guessing Blackout has to do with the dark.
Good bet.
Inferno has something to do with fire, and Nuclear, I'm guessing, is some glowing shit floating around everywhere.
There might be some glowing zombies in there.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So I'm not as dumb as everybody thinks I am as far as this podcast goes. Excellent. Awesome. So, and obviously with this one, you guys are doing some stuff for retailers as well. That's always an important thing whenever we talk about Kickstarters on the podcast. You guys are actually doing some stuff for retailers.
Yeah, we're really committed to supporting the retail side of the industry. We think creating a long tail of success for the game, part of that is going to be retail support and having our game in stores. So, we have a retailer pledge. If you're a retailer and you're listening to this, you can, all of our contact information is on the Kickstarter. And, we have
contact this guy named Tim.
This Tim dude. I don't really know him, but, I hear he knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have wholesale rates for that stuff. And, if you can order cases of the game at a really good rate. And if you choose to back it at significant levels, you'll have some pretty good deals going for you. And again, retailers will receive the core game in Chapter 2 at the same time as backers do in September, and they'll have access to all of the stretch goal material as well from wholesale rates when that stuff releases next year at the same time as the backers do. So, if you're a retailer and this is a game you're going to get into, we are going to be there to make sure that all of our product is available to you at the time when the hype for it is greatest, which is always going to be when it starts hitting the backers' hands.
Right, exactly. And do you have anything that's going to be special scenario based or anything like that for retailers when the game first comes out, or is that something that's kind of in the works, or not really?
So there's a plan to have some to have a new sort of campaign of adventure, a new campaign of scenarios that will be initially exclusive to retailers for a period of time before we publish it elsewhere. But there'll hopefully be a kind of organized plaything where the retailers will get access to these things. They can run the events in their store. And they'll have the first crack at that for free before we turn it into probably a box set or something later on down the road. But it'll be a good way for retailers to get some stuff that's exclusive to get players who want to play the game into their stores, and for us to hopefully show our appreciation for the support for both the retailers and the customers.
Awesome. So it sounds like you guys definitely have had this mapped out for a little bit now, and it's chugging along. I know it's only the first day. It's only been live for 7 hours?
7 hours, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So it's still very, very new. Obviously we're recording this on 5/22 of 2018 for anybody that listens in the future. But so this one, I know this podcast will go live shortly after this one in order to make sure that we can get everything done for it. But you guys actually from WYSIWYG have some other stuff in the pipeline in the future that's not just ZFI related. You want to talk about that just a little bit? I'm sure that there's some people that have heard the name that saw you at Adepticon that were putting something else entirely different.
Yeah, so our other project coming out is we have the license for Planet of the Apes, the movies. So we are making a miniatures board game for that, and that's going to be coming to Kickstarter probably sometime this fall, shortly after the first 2 boxes of ZFI ship to backers, because we kind of want to show people that we're for real. We're making games. You can hopefully have some faith in our ability to produce a game as big as Planet of the Apes, and that game when it comes out is going to be pretty cool. It's kind of got a 3-dimensional aspect to it, The game is going to compact with a number of plastic snap-together trees that your apes can move up and down, and you play the apes because they're the heroes of the new movies. And again, it's going to be campaign and story-based, where you will play a band of apes telling a narrative story kind of in and around the events of the newest trilogy of apes films. And we also do have the license for the original 68 film. So if everything goes well, one of the stretch goals you're going to see is a standalone but compatible box set of 1968 Planet of the Apes, with Charlton Heston and Dr. Zaius and all those cool dudes.
Is one of the missions going to be get your hands off me, you damn dirty apes?
I don't see how it couldn't be.
Yeah, because if that doesn't happen, it's a travesty as a whole.
Yeah, I would feel personally like we'd failed, but I'm sure something like that's going to happen.
Fantastic. So with that one, is it actually going to be where you're playing the humans trying to run from the apes, or like trying to survive from the apes, or are you still playing the apes hunting humans?
I don't quote me on this because I don't think it's entirely nailed down for that box set yet, but I'm pretty sure that one will turn the game on its head and you'll play the humans as the heroes.
Okay, cool. I kind of figured that would be the case just because of the way that the movies have gone down. Like, there's the 68s where it's like, okay, no, I am still rooting in my own way for the humans because, well, we're being enslaved by these monkey people. Right. And, where the new ones, you're like, you're definitely teaming up with Caesar. Mostly because, outside of, what is it, about 6 people? Pretty much the human race is filled with nothing else but a bunch of assholes.
There was not a lot of ambiguity about that, yeah.
Yeah, I think even myself personally, I'm a big fan of apes as a whole. Like one of my favorite animals on the planet is a silverback gorilla. Nice. So it's just one of those things where it's like, looking at the new Planet of the Apes movies, I've talked to my wife about this numerous times. Like, yeah, I'd totally go live with the apes in the woods. I don't even care.
Mm-hmm. Like, I'm with you, man.
At least that way, it's like, okay, I'm going to get into a fist fight. Well, you got to deal with me and this silverback.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's great that way. So, yeah, I'm a big looking forward to that one. Definitely. Now, Z First Impact, I'm definitely interested in because, I am very much old school. I don't want to say dude bro 90s horror because that sounds really wrong, but I've always liked the idea of that, elite force of a few going into a situation and doing their best to mop up, where it's like, everybody, no matter what, they're like, they might as well have their list of abilities and the last one is badass underneath it. And that's always been something that's enticed me in games. So yeah, as far as ZFI goes, I'm definitely looking forward to getting in some more games of this and just, really finding out what the game can do and how it's going to play. I'm actually excited for the new missions that are coming out as well. If everything unlocks, just because of the fact that there's a lot that can be done with this game outside of put dudes on bat, pull trigger, things die.
Yeah, definitely. We have all kind. We've got barricades. There's cool scenery bits that come with the game. We've got the barricades. We've got the dumpsters. The biohazard sign, that's kind of where big zombie hordes will spawn from. It's kind of a blocked off street you can create. But yeah, I mean, it's a really good toolkit for making great zombie stories and sci-fi stories. And I think our developers are really smart guys. It's a real passion project for them. And I know they've got some pretty cool stuff in the works for that.
Cool. So speaking of which, as you just kind of said that, I do have to ask, is there going to be an option for players later on down the line that will allow them to kind of create their own scenarios for the game? I guess a formulaic way of doing it?
We hadn't talked about it, but it's an interesting idea, and I'll certainly pass it along to the devs. I think that could be a cool thing we could do.
Yeah, because I just look at it as there's already so much story behind this game as it is, right? That it's giving people the option to kind of DM their own campaigns, for lack of better terms, I think would be amazing, especially if it's they could go on a website and kind of plug and click and put it all in, and then they print out a PDF and they take it to their friends. They're like, dude, we didn't play this mission. It's yeah, I know, I just made it.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think it's a great idea.
Awesome. Yeah, to me, that would be ace. But then again, I'm also very biased in my own way. But the point of it is that, yeah, I think that there's a lot to this game that's going to have a lot of really cool killer opportunities. The AR thing, love it or hate it. I know there's some people that hate apps and games. At the same time, if it's not necessary to play and it's just one of those cool little things, go ahead and do it. You know,
it's a fun thing you can choose to do, but it does not. You're not going to miss any gameplay if you don't use it.
Nice. And then as far as detail in the figures actually look pretty decent.
Yeah, so, I'm going to paint some up myself sometime this month, just because I'm in my what amounts to my free time, I'm still a really big miniatures wargaming guy, and I just love painting miniatures. So I kind of want to paint some of the blobbers and licks and stuff. So I'll probably post some of those.
If anything, usually I start with the heroes because it's like those are the important ones that like the people I'm playing the games with. It's like, okay, there's mine, and they can easily identify it on a table. So I'd probably start with the heroes before I go on to the zombies. But I definitely, as far as the zombies and mutants go, I like the look of the Ravagers. The idea that it's just a bunch of construction workers.
Yeah,
they're like, oh yeah, so because we do construction, we can climb buildings.
Well, I like to think they were all maybe up there together,
Yeah.
They were having lunch and, somebody started turning green and things went bad from there.
Yeah. And then the blobbers just look disgusting. Like after looking at the miniatures, it's like they have like a hose hooked up to their intestines that sprays.
They sure
something.
do.
Okay. Yeah. So I didn't look at that wrong.
No.
Okay. Well, good to know. Good to know. Shoot them first. Well, no, shoot howlers first, then shoot them.
Right.
Ugh, gross. So yeah, as far as it goes, like the supply cards in the game, like this is not even looking at the Kickstarter page, this is not like a card heavy game. It's not like you've got a deck of 200 some odd ridiculous cards that you have to manage throughout it.
You're going to have at most 4 or 5 cards in play as a single player at any given time, and usually less than that.
Okay. So again, it kind of emphasizes the fact that this is very much a scenario-driven game. Like you have this objective, and you have to meet it with the supplies you have in hand.
Correct.
Awesome. Yeah, that definitely sets it apart from a lot of the other kind of like dungeon crawly, shoot 'em up co-ops out there, where it's just like, oh, I could search a room and find like 18 different weapons because I spent 18 minutes searching a room.
Right.
Cool.
There's always the risk when you search a room that you might find more zombies instead.
Yeah, I saw that.
That can get out of hand pretty quickly.
Nice. So great. So the Kickstarter is live now.
Sure is.
It's going for another 31. Well, as of the time of this recording, call it 30.5 days.
Just about. Yep.
Where can everybody find information about Z First Impact? Obviously, start with the biggest one, which is the Kickstarter.
Yep. And if you find us at WYSIWYGames on Facebook or Twitter, we're posting news there all the time. We've got email lists. We're going to be sharing some stuff on those as well. But yeah, Facebook and Twitter are going to be our 2 big outreaches besides the Kickstarter for now.
Awesome. So you guys are out there all the way showing off the game. You can be reached in multiple different channels. Absolutely.
If you have any questions about the Kickstarter, feel free to ask us on Facebook or Twitter, or if you're already back in the Kickstarter, and if you are, thank you very much. Just drop a comment, and I'll reply to it as soon as I get the chance.
Awesome. Well, Simon, I got to thank you for coming on, man. It's been great talking with you.
It was my pleasure, Tim.
Awesome. Well, folks, that's going to wrap up this episode of Skirmish Supremacy. We will see you next time. Thanks for listening to another episode of Skirmish Supremacy. To see more of the antics that Nick and I do, you can check us out on Facebook at Skirmish Supremacy. We also have Twitter, which we can be reached at Skirmish Supreme, because apparently Skirmish Supremacy does not fit in Twitter. And if you want to email us directly, you can reach us at tim@skirmishsupremacy.com or nick@skirmishsupremacy.com. Thanks for listening.